Okay, in this unit, we're going to cover the specific groups of children, teenagers, and the older adult or the elderly, and the nutritional needs of each group. I don't go into a lot of details on either of these groups. I just kind of want you to know the basics of some of the changes that we see during these periods of time, and also any specific requirements that we see. In general, I deal mainly with the children and teenage years. There's really focus on the challenges that we face for children today in the type of world and our nutritional world today, and the elderly, just some of the challenges they face with their bodies starting to change with age. Excuse me, and I apologize a little bit. I have a little raspy voice. Where I am right now, it's allergy season, and I definitely have the allergies, so I apologize for that ahead of time. Okay, my opening screen here you can see is a food guide pyramid, and I put this up here on purpose this way because I know that this is no longer the current one. These kind of drive me insane as a nutrition instructor because they constantly are changing these. They are overall a good guide as to what you should eat. We generally should eat less fats and sweets, all of us, whether we're kids or not, and eat more in the whole grains, fruits, and vegetables section. But you can see in your books, with new editions, they come out with different recommendations. So I kept this one in here because generally that trend is the same, and I don't want you to try and memorize any of these charts. I just want you to have a general sense of what we should all be doing, especially kids, because kids, that's when we establish our habits. And so it's good to give your children good advice and help them establish good habits early on. I say to my face-to-face students all the time, I don't even really feel like I'm going to necessarily impact your nutrition as much as I will your children's. It's hard to change your habits when you've done certain things your whole life a certain way. As adults, we get kind of ingrained in our habits, but as we learn better, we do better. And if we teach our kids good, healthy eating habits young, they don't have to spend the rest of their life trying to change things. They've already got that established. So the things that we try to establish for ourselves, if we can ingrain that really well in our children, it will give them a lifetime of benefit. So again, this chart is well out of date, I'm sure, in general, but in general, you're going to see that we all should keep our fats and sweets and salts down, and we should all in general should keep our fruits and vegetables and whole grains higher. So first, looking at the teenage years and adolescents and children, the needs for children and teenagers actually change more rapidly early in life than any time in their life, and that's because of that rapid growth period. So the only time that they're outstripped as far as their energy needs go is during those pregnancy and lactation times. But we do see a more rapid change in types of nutrition depending on what stage of life they're in during those growth spurts. And all of that's going to depend on what their gender is. Males and females do need different nutrients at different times, the rate of growth, and their activity level. In general, if you look at your textbook, the big ones to watch as far as nutrients are concerned are fluoride, vitamin D, and iron. Again, fluoride, children are laying down those adult teeth. They don't get enough fluoride through their water and through brushing their teeth. They can develop dental caries or dental cavities. Too much fluoride can result in fluorosis as well, which is not good. So fluoride is very important during these developmental stages. Vitamin D as well for laying down of calcium in the bone, and iron as well, especially for women once they hit those teenage years and they start to develop a menstrual cycle and they're sloughing off blood every month. So those are the big nutrients to watch. In general, though, kids don't really, if they get a well-balanced diet, they really don't need supplements. It's really about trying to establish those healthy eating habits. And you can see we do a very bad job of that in the United States. Approximately 80-81% of the children in the United States are ranked as poor or needs improvement in their diet. So that's pretty pathetic. 4 out of 5 need some sort of improvement in their diet. And of course, the culprits, we see these with adults as well. Their diets are way too high in sugar, saturated fats, calories, cholesterol, those types of things. We do see a lot of salt as well. And the reason for this is, the same culprits for us as adults. We're driven by, I want it now, instant gratification, convenience, going through drive-thrus. We're all driven by that, especially as parents. We're trying to do a lot of things all the time, and we tend to cave into the drive-ins and the snacks at the checkout. And the difference, though, is that with children, is they haven't established their habits yet. They're in those habit forming years. And it's really important for us as adults to help them form those good habits and have good healthy food choices in front of them. They disregard those internal satiety signals that we recognize much quicker as adults. Kids enjoy that feel good sensation of something tasting sweet or fatty, and they'll ignore that fullness feeling or that knowledge that maybe we should stop eating, and they'll overconsume on calories. They don't have the self-control that adults have, so they don't make as good of decisions as we do in adult years. So it's very important that we recognize that when trying to establish good eating habits with our kids, and that just invites obesity if we don't limit those things. Like I said, individual children's energy needs are going to vary widely depending on their growth rate and physical activity, and this will vary a little bit child to child, but in general, a 1-year-old needs approximately 800 calories a day. At 6 years, they'll need about another 800 calories more, so about by school age years, that should double. By 10 years of age, about 2,000 calories a day to support normal growth and activity. When you look at that, you think, well, boy, they're already consuming adult level calories by 10 years of age. That's actually, pound for pound, they're actually consuming more calories per unit of weight than an adult does. So even, as, with age, the total calorie need increases, but the calorie per pound of body weight decreases. So as they get older and get closer to adulthood, they're actually decreasing the number of calories they're taking in, even though the calorie amount is staying the same, if that kind of makes sense. So proportionately, they need 80-pound 10-year-old needs a lot more calories than I do per pound of body weight. But if they want to maintain a healthy weight and not store excess body fat, this is approximately the calories that they will need. A lot of people think that, we're supposed to eat 3 square meals a day, and that's not necessarily the case. We're kind of designed to eat every 2 to 3 hours and eat small meals or snacks. And kids are notorious for liking a snack. They're constantly looking for crackers or cheese or something simple and quick around the house. So, lots of times kids will snack so that they don't really want anything at mealtime. I know my kids are guilty of this. They get home from school and they hit the fridge right away, and by the time it's time to eat supper, they're not hungry anymore. And I'm frustrated because I just made a nice big meal, but that's okay. It's okay if they don't want to eat, because as long as they're getting healthy snacks after they walk in the door after school, that's normal. It's if they're getting good nutritious snacks, that's just as important as a good nutritious meal. So if you make a habit of keeping healthy snacks around the house that are simple, easily available, and accessible for kids, and of course age appropriate. My oldest child, he can take out the knife and cut up the block cheese now, but a couple years ago he could just grab the string cheese. So you need to make sure it's age appropriate with the availability of the food. But keeping the fridge stocked with lots of low sugar yogurts and cheese, and I'll cut up lots of like little sliced meats as well. I'll try and have celery sticks and carrots cut up. Even if it means they consume a little bit of dressing, so be it. I'll try and have out a plate of grapes, cut up strawberries. Try and make those things accessible out on the counter. I always have a fruit bowl out, bananas, apples, pears, peanut butter sandwiches on whole grain bread, whole grain cereals. All of those things are very good snacks for kids. If you can limit the candy bars in the house and the chips and all those kinds of things, snacking can be a good thing. It can be much more healthy with lots of fruits and vegetables around. We do know there's a ton of studies out there that look at deficiencies in nutrition and how that plagues children. You will see physical and behavioral symptoms in kids who are lacking certain types of nutrients. No doubt about it, if they're not getting the right energy-yielding nutrients, you'll see the issues with obesity and the inability to exercise and perform, shortness of breath, onset of gestational diabetes, deficiencies in protein, energy, vitamin A, iron, zinc. Those are common too in when we look globally as well. And I'll talk more about that in another unit on global nutrition issues. But you do see major problems with development at appropriate ages for height and weight and reproduction, fertility in women. These deficiencies will stunt growth, cause all sorts of problems. And we do know a lot of these deficiencies will contribute to immune system issues, make people more susceptible to illnesses. Lack of vitamin A will cause blindness, lots of other problems. So worldwide deficiencies will lead to nearly half the deaths in children under the age of 4. And for those who don't die, they'll see major problems with development as well. So in the U.S., we tend to see more physical and behavioral symptoms in children, but worldwide, we actually see death occur from nutritional deficiencies. A couple of terms that I want you to know, and I like to ask test questions about these, so make sure you keep these straight. There's a difference between a food allergy, a food intolerance, and a food aversion. So make sure that you understand the differences. First, an allergy is a food allergy is when you actually elicit an immune response. Your body will release antibodies or white blood cells in response to what they see as a foreign substance, or what we know as an antigen. An antigen is anything that we see as foreign. It can be a bacteria, a virus. Typically, it's some sort of glycoprotein, or what we call a cell surface marker. And we see these with food. We see these with, like I said, bacteria and viruses. Dust, ragweed, pollen, kind of the raspy voice I have today is due to an allergy response to something in my environment that my body identifies as foreign. And so my immune system is kicking in and trying to stop it. And that can result in inflammations in the body, internally and externally. You can have local swelling, hives, rashes. They can be relatively minor and localized, or they can be severe. And an example of a severe one is what we call anaphylactic shock. Anaphylactic shock is when the entire body has a major systemic reaction to some sort of allergen. And so it's an over-response of the immune system on a large scale, and it can be life-threatening. The bronchial tubes in the lungs will swell up so much that a person can't breathe. They'll start wheezing, and their lungs will shut off. They might have such terrible swelling that all the fluid is rushing out of their veins and their vessels to where their blood pressure craters, and they can no longer maintain a blood pressure, and their heart will stop. So a very serious type of allergic reaction with anaphylactic shock. And you see this with, typically you'll see this with people with a bee allergy, if they're allergic to bee stings, but also in the realm of food, you see it with peanuts. You see a lot of people who have severe allergic reactions to peanuts. Some schools actually have the peanut butter table, where kids who have peanut allergies actually eat separate from all the other kids in a lunchroom, just to make sure that they don't have peanut butter exposure in their lunch line. Or some schools have even just done away with peanut butter altogether. Again, just some terminology that goes along with food allergy. Antibodies are the large protein molecules that some of our white blood cells will release in response to the presence of those antigens, to help inactivate or immobilize those antigens. Histamine, it's also another protein, but its job isn't necessarily to tie up the foreign substance. Its job is to cause the inflammation. The inflammation is really a good thing. It's designed to help immobilize foreign substances in our tissues so that they can't circulate any further from where they penetrate. But when too much histamine is released, that's what causes that swelling, the wheezing of the lungs, all those kinds of problems. So we see too much histamine released in an allergic reaction. And you can take like a Benadryl or something like that. Benadryl is known as an antihistamine because it blocks those histamine receptors. But when you see histamine antibodies, that's dealing with a food allergy. So again, food allergy, the body actually finds that there's something in the food that is foreign to that body. And so it will elicit an immune response to attack it, essentially. That's different than a food intolerance. A food intolerance doesn't involve the immune system, but it is an adverse reaction by the body. There's something in that food, or there's a food additive that the body can't process. It doesn't know what to do with it. And a lot of people have heard of a lactose intolerance before. That's a good example of a food intolerance. Some people don't have the enzyme lactase in their stomach to help them break down the lactose sugar in milk. And as a result, the body doesn't know what to do with it, and it causes a lot of bloating and irritation of the stomach and the bowel linings. and can make people very sick. So that's a food intolerance, but that's not an immune response. We see this now a little bit with gluten as well. A couple different things going on with gluten. Some people have a gluten intolerance where the body literally cannot process it. But there's also some people who have what's called celiac disease, which is a gluten intolerance. But celiac disease, typically you're seeing that immune system response. There's something genetically where you don't accept the gluten. So there's a couple different, there's gluten intolerance, there's celiac disease. There's a couple different things going on with gluten. For those of you that don't know, gluten is a protein that's found mainly in wheat. And so a lot of the products that we have in the grocery store have a wheat base to them. And so people are finding that they're intolerant to this gluten protein. And I think a little insight into why we're seeing that more, I think, is because our bushel yields are so much higher nowadays on wheat. And I think the crop productivity is such that we're just making larger and larger gluten proteins in our wheat yields. We've genetically modified our crops to the point where we're yielding so much more, and our bodies just haven't evolved at the rate that our crops have. And so I think what's going on is because we see so much more gluten intolerance is those gluten proteins are getting so big so big and so bulky that we're just not able to process them the way we used to be. We just haven't evolved that fast, and that's why you're seeing more of it. That's just a little speculation, but that's what I think is going on. So that's food intolerance. Food aversion, this has nothing to do with immune response. This has nothing to do with being unable to process the food. This has to do with just, I don't like this food for whatever reason. There's just this intense dislike. It typically is something that's psychological in nature, maybe biological, but typically you have some sort of negative experience with the food, some sort of illness. Maybe you ate something and then threw it up because you had the flu or whatever, or maybe you had food poisoning from something, and so even though you can process that food, you had a bad experience by getting sick from it, so now you don't want to eat it anymore. This is like the little kid who eats broccoli. Mom makes him eat broccoli and he pukes it up, and so now he's a 30-year-old adult and he still won't eat broccoli, even though he's not allergic to it. He doesn't have an intolerance to it. He has that terrible memory of food, that broccoli, and so he's averse to it. He's doesn't want it. So some of the so you see that with kids a lot. You see that aversion to food. They don't like to necessarily try new things. So that's another reason why it's so important to let kids snack and have lots of options for them to snack, so they can feel free to try different foods that they like, but try and keep those healthy options out there as much as possible. Other challenges we see with kids is just the digital age we live in. Average kid is watching 3+ hours of TV a day. My stats are probably even old. It used to just be television, but now you've got your iPads and your iPods and your Xboxes and your PlayStations. They're looking at numbers rising up to 6 hours a day and even higher. I've read some studies that say kids are watching up to 9 hours a day. I don't know how they're doing that. I'm assuming they're doing some computer work at school too, but between computers and the internet and TV, we're just seeing more and more digital consumption by everybody, but especially our youth. And so it goes as no surprise that with all that increase in digital consumption, kids who watch more than 4 hours of TV a day or watch during their meals, they're less likely to eat fruits and vegetables. They're more likely to snack on things that are poor for them, and they're more likely to be obese. There's so many studies out there that show this. I don't even cite any of them. You can Google it and find a million of them. It's not surprising, and it is unbelievable the direct links between digital consumption and obesity rates. And why is that? Why is digital consumption have such a great impact on obesity and obesity-related illnesses? Well, when you are sitting there watching TV, it doesn't really require any energy. So it's going to reduce your metabolic rate below even what we consider a resting level. If you're just laying on a couch all day, it takes less energy than even if you're sitting in a chair. So you don't require any energy really to consume the digital world. So that's time where you're not using any energy. That's time that is wasted that could have been spent at energetic play. A kid comes home and lays on the couch, they could have been outside playing basketball. So inactive children can become obese even when eating less food than an active child. So I see this even in my own family. My kids eat a lot of food. They are consuming out of house and home here, but they play basketball. They go to open swim. They go on bowling league. Anytime I can find something for them to participate in their school, I try to get them to participate, just to keep them active and away from the TV. So even though they are consuming a ton of calories, they're very skinny, and it has a lot more to do, I think, with the fact that they don't sit in front of the TV and consume a lot of digital information, and more to do with the fact that they burn it off. They're active. So that time that's lost that could have been spent at energetic play is contributing to obesity as well. You see more between meal snacking, and again, it's not a bad thing to snack between meals, but when kids are laying on the couch, they don't tend to eat broccoli. They don't tend to eat a whole grain peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They tend to break open the bag of chips, and they tend to consume the sodas. So that in between meal snacking in front of the TV tends to be less healthy. And then also you see foods are heavily advertised in children's programs. A lot of the digital consumption will have commercials including advertisements for candies and chips and soda pops. So they're getting impacted, from a million different angles when they're in that digital world. Average U.S. kid watches over 30,000 television commercials a year, and most of those are highly targeted to them for candies, sugar-coated cereals, chips, fast food, soft drinks, all of those things. I mean, imagine that. There's only 365 days a year. They're literally getting thousands and thousands of messages every week, and even the most diligent parent can't tell them to eat healthy that many times a week. It's the best thing to do is to do as much as you can to keep healthy foods in the house, create good habits, create good mealtime and snacking options around the house, and limit the consumption of all that digital world. Try to limit how much TV the kids watch so they don't consume as many of those commercials. No doubt about it, it kind of goes without saying, intake of sugary foods and soft drinks and fatty treats that's soared in recent years. We haven't seen a significant decrease in those things, and with the increase in those sugary foods and soft drinks, we've seen an increase in obesity. Again, one thing you can do with helping them understand how marketing works, not only cut off as much of that marketing as you can, but let your kids know at age appropriate levels how marketing works and how they're getting them suckered in to buying those certain things. So as they get older, you can kind of cue them in on how these different companies are pitching their products to them, and letting them know, yeah, you can have something every once in a while, but limit yourself. Don't engage in these types of foods all the time. Breakfast. They always say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and yes, it is, absolutely, for everybody, not just for kids, but for everybody. But especially kids, because of the fact that they're in these growth stages. It should be a central feature of a child's diet. If they're not getting those healthy calories early in the day, they are going to be lacking nutrients that really can't be made up during the day. They're going to see these deficiencies, and it's going to affect their ability to function and focus in school. It's going to push them to eat quicker, more calories quicker and more conveniently, which is going to probably push them into the candies and the sugary sodas. And strangely enough, it sounds counterintuitive, but kids who don't eat breakfast tend to be more overweight. A lot of people think, well, that doesn't make sense. They're not consuming those calories. But when they don't eat those healthy calories, they will find something when they're famished later on that's quick and easy. And so they tend to eat more sugary things. They'll try and make up those calories later, but it tends to be poorer foods that they'll eat. So kids tend to be more overweight if they skip that meal. They also perform more poorly on a task at school. They have shortened attention spans, lower test scores. They tend to be more tardy and absent. If they're not taking time to sit down and eat breakfast in the morning, they're typically running behind and late for school or absent for school. And all that makes sense. If you stop and think about it, when the last time you were really, really hungry, do you think you could have taken a test? Do you think you could have focused well? It's very, very hard to focus on something when your stomach's growling. So getting kids that breakfast is so important for them to be successful in school. School lunches. This is a little bit of a controversy because Our school lunch system in the United States is subsidized by the federal government. And the government, in all of their wisdom, does, promote that if you want to get federal dollars, you have to have certain things in your lunch, which is a good thing. You have to serve a milk. You have to have some sort of protein-rich food. And that can be, here's some examples of some typical protein-rich offerings you could have. You have to serve a vegetable, you have to serve a fruit, and you have to serve some sort of grain or bread. So that looks very good on the surface, but there's quite a range of offerings you can have for these different things. Breaded chicken breasts might be cheaper for the school to buy than lean chicken breasts, but they both count as a meat product. So what is the school to do when they're trying to cut costs? They tend to find what will fit into these categories and cost them the least amount of money and still get the reimbursement. So, maybe having fresh chicken breasts are more expensive and better for the students, but they can get by on a fried fish patty for cheaper. So even though the government does require these areas for school lunches, they're not always necessarily the most nutritious. For example, another example, the milk. Students can usually pick what type of milk they want, and chocolate milk, which is very high in sugar and fat, is an option that the kids can pick as their milk source versus just taking a skim milk. So, and also some schools will they will contract with outside providers. And here I have it on this page as well. Sometimes private vendors will come in and offer certain meals, and the schools will just abdicate that responsibility to an outside contractor who can do it for cheaper. And so they'll have some campuses will even have an Arby's or a Wendy's or a McDonald's right on campus. I think we've kind of gotten a little bit away from that. I always hear stories from students of, they had a Pizza Hut on campus, or one thing students will often notice is there's lots and lots of fast food restaurants right next to their campus. So if they have an open lunch system, they can leave campus and go get the types of foods that they want at those fast food restaurants. So it's not always the best options that schools have, but that's something as a parent you can influence. You can raise your voice up at the school board. You can push for change. We've seen some schools actually start to reject offers for vending machines and things like that in their schools. Lots of times schools will get kickbacks from the profits of those vending machines, of those sugary sodas, and so that's why we're putting those in the schools. But a lot of people are now starting to take those out, or at least turn off vending machines during school hours. They might be on during after-school events and things like that. But it's very hard for kids to reject the offer of a vending machine when that's right there and available to them when the lunch line is just a salad. So those are some things that will plague students' temptations. Like I mentioned, there's frozen confections, candy, soft drinks. There's lots of vending machines nearby, or they'll have school stores, or like I said, they'll have fast food restaurants close. So here you have people at one of the most important times nutritionally in their life, when they have the least impulse control, and they're being tempted everywhere. So those are some things we need to think about when we see the challenge of obesity rising. Less than a third, or approximately a third of adolescents have an evening meal at home with their family, but most of them say that it's important to them. Very few people sit around the table anymore and have dinner with their family at night. Our lives are overbooked and busy, and obviously you guys are students going to class, and you've got a million things going on, and so it's very hard to take those family meals. But they are highly valued by kids. Every survey shows it, that kids do like to eat at home with their family. And when we eat at home around a table, we tend to eat slower, we tend to eat less, and we tend to eat healthier. If we're eating in a drive-thru, we're usually drinking a soda. But if we're eating around the kitchen table, we tend to pour milk or water. We tend to have side dishes of fruits and vegetables at home, whereas in a drive-thru, we have French fries as our side dish. So meals at home are valued by kids, and meals at home tend to be much healthier. So anything you can do to increase the family meal setting in your family is a positive thing. Like I mentioned earlier, pregnancy and lactation are the only times in life when nutrient needs exceed the needs seen during adolescence. So other than the time when you're actually growing another person, This is the time when you have the greatest nutritional needs. The need for iron is pretty high, protein, vitamin D. You need all those things for lean muscle mass. Females need that iron for menstrual cycles. Calcium, like I mentioned, vitamin D, those help support peak bone mass. If you're not getting that vitamin D and calcium at these crucial growth times, you can limit the amount of bone mass you have your entire life. So very, very important to make sure that you're getting those nutrients. So keep those in mind as you're trying to instill healthy eating habits in your kids. Just a couple of things to mention on the later years in life. I don't typically ask a lot of questions on these, but just a couple of things to note. As we age, in general, everything seems to slow down. Yes, I'm going to leave you with some depressing thoughts on these last few slides. Our energy needs tend to decrease with advancing age, and as a general rule of thumb, after about the age of 50, your energy intake assumption should be about a 5% reduction per decade. So if you typically would consume 2,000 calories a day, after the age of 50, from the ages of 50 to 60, you should reduce that by about 5%, which is, what is that? That's about 100 calories a day. So typically drop it down, 5% reduction for each decade after 50. And also really watch the foods you intake for nutrient density, because absorption rates tend to decrease with age as well. So your vitamins and minerals, excuse me, tends to be harder for your body to absorb those nutrients, with the exception of vitamin A. Strangely enough, vitamin A, we tend to be better at absorbing as we age, which is kind of strange. But most nutrients, it's harder for our bodies to absorb them because our bodies they're wearing out and they're not as efficient at absorbing nutrients. And I have a chart here to depress you. No, just a chart to kind of tell you some of the issues that we see as we age. Again, the digestive tract tends to lose muscle strength, so we tend to suffer more from impaired digestion. We tend to suffer more from constipation. So important to keep our fiber up, keep our water consumption up. We worry more about choking as people age as well. People will have gum disease or tooth loss. They're not as good at chewing and swallowing their food. We do see an increase typically in salt consumption as people age, because their taste buds are not as sensitive anymore. So it's hard to make food taste as good. So that's something that might reduce appetite or increase the sodium intake. So that's something to watch, especially if you have high blood pressure. We tend to see weight loss and decline of lean body mass. We'll see people lose, even if they don't lose weight, their body will start to become more fatty and lose a lot of their lean muscle. So very important as you age, as well as when you're younger, to get lots of exercise along with a healthy diet. So keep those things in mind as you age. You generally need about 5% less calories a day for each decade past 50. You generally don't absorb nutrients as well. It gets harder to chew and process your food. So increase the nutrient-dense foods, increase the fiber in your diet, and also make sure that you're consuming enough water to reduce bloating and constipation as well.